this lesson module, we're going to be learning about basic gardening. Today, we're going to be starting with seeds.
That's really cool, but why do we need eggshells if we're going to be planting seeds?
Well, actually, the eggshell is a great starter for the seed. You could leave them in the eggshell, decorate them, and watch them sprout.
But what happens when the seed needs to be planted in a pot or in the ground?
Well, the eggshell actually produces lots of minerals and calcium for the plant to grow. And all you gotta do is poke a hole in the bottom and bury it in the sand.
That's amazing. What are we going to be planting today?
We have kale, green beans, we have purple coneflower, and this pretty pink flower.
That's awesome. I'll start on the beans.
Starting your own backyard garden starts with seeds. It's easy to start a small garden with some seeds or some already grown plants at your local nursery. Seeds are different ways that you can do them. You know, I save these from the local nursery when I buy things so I can replant in there. That's easy to do. And you'll want to make sure that you have the proper soil to do so. There's so many books and things that you can watch or read, websites, all those different things. So we won't go into that, but I will share one of my favorite books with you that gives you all those details. And it's called Square Foot Gardening. They make one for children called Square Foot Gardening for Kids. And I would suggest that that is a really great book to start with because he really talks a lot about small spaces. And most of us have small spaces for our gardening. If you have a great big area, that's fabulous. I'm excited for you. But most of us have small spaces or are unfamiliar with gardening, and so we want to start small. So there's different ways that you can do that. You can start with preparing soil. That's a lot of fun for kids, getting in there, digging in the dirt, getting dirty, and planting your seeds. There's also different ways where you can get the pellets, where you add water and the pellet expands around the seed. And then you put the entire piece in the ground. Abby and Julia showed you a really cool way to do seeds with eggshells, which I think is a fun ongoing process you can do with your kids. There's different ways you want to start your seeds, but oftentimes you want to start them indoors if you can. It's a great way to kind of document how long it takes for your seeds to sprout. And one thing I recommend is starting with something big. When I say big, I mean green beans. Green beans to me are one of the easiest things for children to grow with the biggest impact. Because the seed is large, you're not going to lose it. Some seeds are so small that we've lost all the seeds before we got them in the pot. Bean seeds are generally big, and so planting them is easy for small hands. Also, it has the biggest impact as far as sprouting. It has a nice thick stem and a big leaf. And a lot of times, you know, the children are going to want to touch them and feel them. And they're going to survive a little better than a very delicate, fragile bloom. Green beans also are yummy and a great vegetable. You can get them in a bush variety or in a vine. I always try to do the vine because kids love to watch those vines grow. They love to search for the green beans. So my suggestion is to start with something like that. That's gonna give you a big impact. Also, the green beans tend for us not to have such a problem with bugs and disease. We have a real big problem with tomatoes. So tomatoes sometimes are good and sometimes they're not. So for children, it's a little bit harder for them to get, an excitement and have an end product with tomatoes, depending on where you live. Gardening is definitely dependent on where you live. And to find out the best things to plant and the best things for your soil would be to visit your local extension office in your county. They generally have free classes on gardening, they have pamphlets, they have a website, and often do workshops for kids in gardening as well. So if you haven't gardened before, I would suggest starting with your county extension office. They're always willing to help, and they love for new gardeners to come in so they can share information with them. So those are a few tips on getting started with your garden. The green beans are great. You can start them inside. You can watch them grow. You can do an experiment on measurement on how fast they grow. Find a spot where you can put them outside. You can also plant them directly in the ground, and they'll do quite well doing that as well. And we're gonna have Grant plant some of those for us in a little while. And we're gonna document how long it takes for them to sprout, and then how to grow into the vine, and then how long it takes to get our green beans. Oftentimes, children will try new vegetables if they've grown it or picked it themselves. So doing something like that is a great way to get them to eating different kinds of vegetables and loving the vegetables themselves. When Grayson was a little boy, that was the first thing that we did was green beans, and he loved the whole process. And every day he was excited to go out and check his green beans. Now, oftentimes we might have just had 3 green beans at supper time, but that's okay. It's all in the process and all in learning. Children are going to love things that they grow. They're going to often taste it, whether, if they got to choose it, they're going to taste it. Gardening is great if you can do that at home, but also you can kind of get the same effect if you go to a U-Pick farm. Across the country, there's U-Pick farms, not just for pretty fruits like strawberries and blueberries, but also for vegetables that you can go right on the farm and pick themselves. A lot of places in our area have greenhouses, which work well here in Florida during the summertime to go and pick those tomatoes that we're having trouble growing. So find different options that work for your family to bring that kind of nature into your home and really loving the process of how food grows. If you haven't experienced that as a child, learning that alongside your children can be a wonderful lifelong lesson that you won't forget. Children understanding where food comes from, that there's a process of it growing and that it doesn't automatically come in cans or show up in the grocery store, is a great lesson as well in patience and perseverance, which will help them later in life.